Solomon Pakal is an occult practitioner of over 20 years in numerous esoteric paths. He is a historian, former United States Army officer, former professional and amateur athlete, and combat sports analyst. He is of Cachiquel Mayan descent and was raised in this tradition of folk witchcraft by his family. You can learn more at solomonpakal.com, and you can check that out in the description as well. The Mayan Mystery Codex is his Substack, which is incredible. Like, he's literally been predicting the world events that we all keep saying are unprecedented and unpredictable. So definitely worth checking out. And on a personal note, I met Solomon in person, which is so rare these days, right? At Sacred Space Conference 2025. And we really hit it off because guess what, people? The Mayans are not dead and gone. They're real. Solomon's here representing. And we're going to talk about the sacred places that you can find in Guatemala, what a temple, might have been like for the ancients in Guatemala, but also, yeah, just all the things Mayan, because we actually already started recording like 30 minutes before this and have already been talking because that's just how easy Solomon is to talk to. So I'm excited for this episode because it's going to be really, really fun.
Welcome to Seeking Noumena. I'm your host, Elise Wells, and I invite you to connect with the sacred wild within and around you through noumena, or sacred sites, around the world and the wisdom they hold. Together, let's remember the old ways, build relationships with land spirits, and dare to reach out to the fairies. The sacred wild is inviting you to dance in the moonlight. Will you answer their call?
We're going to have a good discussion. I think we're going to draw a lot of parallels between you and I because we come from that similar background of being of the culture, of speaking the language, and then also diving into scholarly resources, on-the-ground resources, all of that. So we can bring multiple dimensions of interpretation to our respective paths that maybe someone coming from the outside maybe wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really a blessing. Like, I had to fight with that. I don't know if you had this imposter syndrome, but I had to really fight with, like, am I Greek enough to do this? But then it's like, well, but I'm not like all American apple pie either. So, it's that liminal space of inhabiting that can be hard.
I most certainly did because I am 50% Maya on my mother's side, who, from everything we can tell in the genealogical record, is purely indigenous. And my father, who's Anglo-Saxon, American, he's from Atlanta. he's a Southern gentleman, as they like to say. So I had to ask myself this question, but at the same time, I grew up in a witchcraft culture. Like, the way I grew up, my family came from Guatemala, but I was born in Washington, D.C. But Washington, D.C. is a real and has been a real melting pot for a long time. People think of like an L.A. or a New York City as like an American melting pot that can truly say it's international. Washington, D.C. always has. I think it's just had a weird reputation as a city because it's a political center and a lot of people commute. But like, I lived in the city, and there you would find people from Afro-Caribbean traditions, from Eastern traditions, but the majority were actually like Mexican and Central American people. Even if like the majority of people that owned the shops were Santeria and base, and they were Santeros or Babalaos that owned the shops, the majority of practitioners that came into that shop for supplies were Mexican and Central American. So people of Mesoamerican descent, of native
Hmm.
Mesoamerican descent. And you can tell by their facial features, you can tell by their body stature where their genetics come from. So I've wrestled with that because, coming from the culture, I know that there are Maya traditions that have survived well into the 21st century. And I mean, largely established ones too, because we were talking about some traditions that make a mountain out of a molehill. Specifically, the Guatemalan daykeeper tradition has over 8,000 registered daykeepers. Show me another
Wow.
magical organization that has not 8,000 followers, 8,000 authority figures. That's different. I don't even know if the Golden Dawn had that many
Yeah, or even
people.
like Obod, like the Order of Bards, Obates, and Druids out of the UK. I don't think they have that many Druids that have
Yeah,
completed the grade and are now teaching. I don't think so. That's
there you go.
incredible.
And this is just one of the Maya traditions. It's the largest one, but there's several Maya traditions that have survived in various capacities, and some of them aren't as organized as that, but they're not any less legitimate. Like
Yeah, they're
my
not
family
going.
does, yeah, like my family, the tradition where we come from is you can just call it brujeria, but brujeria is a very broad term. Why that term is useful though is because it kind of communicates the informalness of how indigenous magic had survived in the Americas during colonization and during Catholic rule, because you couldn't be very organized. It's not incentivized if you want to keep your life. So things were done in the shadows, and people were doing magic all the time, but they were doing it in much more discreet manners. And there were more overt efforts, your chicken spells, your chicken feet spells, your jar spells, I like all of that stuff, but it was never, you couldn't organize it as visibly. And also depended on geographic location. I think the daykeepers always had a advantage because they were in the highlands. I mean, there's Catholic rule there too, but it's just easier to hide things in places like that.
Literally. Yeah, it's mountainous. Yeah.
Yeah, and it took the conquistadors the longest time to kind of get up there, more or less. But like my family comes from this background of like highly practical magic, and I found out somewhat recently with some historical evidence that we come from. I believe I can trace back to where we hold our like deeper esoteric stuff to pre-Columbian society. That's a whole can of worms, but it has to do with like the Maya recollection of the seven planets, the seven traditional planets. A lot of people don't know.
Mm.
People think Mayan and planets, they think just Venus, and it was so much more than just Venus. They had a recollection and a regard for all of the classical planets in a cosmological way that's similar to what you find in Greece and what you find in the Greco-Egyptian world. I'm not saying they mean all the same things. They clearly had different number correspondences for those planets, but the regard is similar enough to not ignore. My family's tradition is much more informal in that regard. It was a bit more grittier. There was, like, I guess you could say, like when you think witchcraft, that's like where I come from. Whereas when you think day keeping, you think more mysticism. And it's not entirely that. That would be a surface level, distinction as well. But it is much more inclined to be that. Whereas like, you want something done, that's where you come to my family. And there's people in my family that have done jobs, so to speak, for daykeepers because they are much more mystically inclined. So when they want something done, they would go to somebody who can do that kind of work. So that's the kind of background I come from. Those are two very distinctive traditions. And then there's so much more across the Mayan world. Because something to keep in mind, first of all, the Mayans, that's an incorrect word, but these days it's a little bit more liberal. But the Maya were never a unified empire. People like say the Mayan Empire and stuff, especially like during 2012, they like to say that. But there was never
Yeah.
a Mayan Empire. They were a loose confederation of city-states. They've never agreed on anything, and they still can't agree on anything these days, even if they're ethnically Maya. What has further distanced these traditions from each other are the modern borders. Like Belize and Guatemala are always having border disputes, and Guatemala is threatening to invade Belize and stuff, and never happens. And then Mexico's got its own borders. Honduras and Salvador have their own borders too. And like the Pipil people in Salvador have their own kind of almost like a sanctioning of culture away from Guatemala and the rest of the Maya world. So a lot of these traditions, they really sprouted up on their own and their own like survival mechanisms. So when you hear about like an actual Maya elder or this is what the Maya believed and stuff like that, understand that there's an asterisk with that because a lot of Maya traditions don't recognize the other, or maybe they'll recognize the other, but they're like, well, they don't speak for us. Like a big contention right now is the idea of gods. And a lot of people don't like that word gods. So there's this question going around, did the Maya ever have gods?
Hmm.
And the truth of the matter is that if you sit down and you talk to people that say that they didn't have gods, what they're going to give you in description is a Neoplatonic description of what a god or a form is. And I think that nuance is missing. People have this reactionary effect of running away from Christian terminology whatsoever, so they don't like the word God, and they think God is just kind of like an X-Men character in the sky. And what the Maya are describing are what a lot of other pagan cultures have described, whereas these things are embodiments of the forces of nature, and maybe they are personalized or characterized expressions of elements of existence. So it's like they're saying that's not a god. But in like modern religious studies, that's probably what you would call a god. In modern religious studies, you wouldn't say God. The word God is not confined to the Christian paradigm.
Yeah.
So I would say there's no problem with the word gods. Like my family and my tradition doesn't have a problem with it. You could say that's, oh, because we're colonized. I think it's much more nuanced than that because we're not simply looking at it as a cultural thing. We're looking at it from a practice thing. Like we do
Yeah.
these things. We're
So
not just like our.
in ancient times, was it more tribal or city state based for the quote unquote gods that were revered, or was it just like was it in the nature? Was it in the landscape? Like was that mountain the deity that they would revere, or you know what I mean?
A quick answer is both, but uh, depending on the time period we're talking about, classic period is the quintessential example that cities, states had their own patron gods. And I don't think this is wrong. I don't think that this is a bad articulation. I think polytheism is what they practice. I think like if you described it without the word polytheism and then you brought it into a dictionary, you would find it falls under a description of polytheism. But that's not their only elements of religion. Like I'm going to be doing a presentation at Mystic South where I'm going to talk about the 10 systems of occult indigenous philosophy, meaning that deity worship was a part of it, but so was animism, shamanism, time worship, and to maybe to some like reclaiming natives, they would say, well, all of this was happening at the same time, and we didn't have a literal word for the word spirituality or religion because it was all intermixed at the same time. It's like, well, okay, yeah, but we're not speaking Maya. We're speaking the English language, and we're trying to discern this through conversation. So to distinguish these systems isn't bad. It's just to kind of round it out with the context. So they did have a polytheistic model. I don't have a problem with saying that. And there's other groups of Maya, like the Khrushchev Maya in Belize. I'm a big fan of them. They don't mind using the word gods at all because uh, I've had discussions with some of them. When they use the word gods plural, it's kind of like a middle finger to like the Christian establishment, anyways, because they're
Yeah.
like only one. So and the Khrushchev Maya too, they're very aware that these are more. They're not just like some X-Men in the sky. They're not like a superhero that is, like when people think of a genie or something. It's not just something that grants your wishes. It's something to really be in awe of. But these kinds of notions, they're not too dissimilar from like even biblical descriptions of angels. Like the numinous cannot be confined to what we have associated conventional religion with in the last 500 years. And the indigenous Maya had a very similar articulation to the word deity that you find in many pagan societies. I am personally on the mission, though, to reprogram that word because like there's clearly some struggle involved with it. I don't have a problem with the words gods. I can understand for people that do. And I think I'm going to tip my hat and turn to the ATR religions. And I think they have done a fantastic job with maintaining cultural pride by using the word Orisha because when you are talking about Santeria and Yoruba, you don't you don't default to the word gods. Many people default to the word Orishas, and they know that it's a god per se, but they purposely default to Orisha first. And I think we need to do that with the Mayan pantheon. And the Maya, the best example of this that has been preserved primarily in Belize is and Yucatan, Mexico as well. But my family maintains this is the word Yumsil. Yumsil basically
Mm.
means like this holy, distinguished, or again, it doesn't literally translate to God, but it is like this. It quite literally means this great, shining thing from beyond, essentially. Yumsil would be the singular. Yumsilob would be the plural of it, and it's almost like a pantheistic plurality of the divine, is what it kind of means. And
Hmm.
that's what all of these figures you see on temple sides are, that they made offerings to and did massive citywide rituals. And that too takes systems. I'm a big proponent of systems. I have seen it in the practice side of things, whether it's in brujeria or like in ritual magic, and then comparing notes with other people. It is typically systems that help preserve culture and religion, but also maximize efficiency. When I was a youngster in the craft, I was more disorganized and I was just young, but like my results were not really, maybe were noteworthy, but not substantial. The more I systematized things, it got better. Systemization is not a product of colonizers. If we had 10,000 plus pyramids in the New World, that's just Mexico, by the way, and that was Mexico 15 years ago that we know of 10,000 pyramids. You don't do that by just like intuitive flow, man. You do that
Yeah.
by making sure everybody's at the right place at the right time in the right uniform, as we like to say in the military. And you do that with counting systems. You do that with precise astronomical alignments, which they had all this. Like the Maya counting system is a whole nother can of worms, but it's a system for a reason. They used a base
Yeah.
20 counting system, and you can find that even in the continental United States. So the influence of the Maya and all of the Mesoamerican civilizations are you can find them here in the United States too. The legacy of the mother civilizations of this continent are widespread through both continents. They're highly relevant to anybody who is living here on the American continents.
Yeah, you teased at time worship. What did that look like? Because that so often, and I like that we're in this liminal space beyond the physical, spiritual places, but what is it to be inspirited? That's been the conversation so far. And I also like thinking about, okay, what are the other spirits that exist with us in place, but aren't physical? And time is a huge manifestation of that. And we have it in the Greek tradition as well. Like we view time in two different ways, two main different ways. Both are gods, and I can go into that, but I want to hear your how that was done.
The most overt example is obviously the Mayan calendar, the sacred calendar called the Solkin or the Cholki in Quiche Maya. And it uses that base 20 counting system for what are called 20 day signs or 20 Nahuales or 20 Chumil. This is what you would call Mayan astrology, but to call it Mayan astrology is like a bit technically incorrect because when we think astrology, we're thinking about the stars, right? Like how the stars from the what is outside of the earth affects us here on earth. And while one of the day signs in particular does kind of correspond to a planet, but it's more of a poetic sense rather than trying to track it in the sky. What the Solkin and the day signs are actually earthbound astrology. So I guess geoastrology, if you could call it. Sometimes I call it telluric astrology. There's many of my elders have called them telluric forces. And what they are not necessarily movements of the stars or like external zodiacs. And the Maya did have constellations as well. So, but this is different than that, which I find fascinating, right? Because when we're comparing astrologies throughout amongst different cultures, right? It's typically like what did they call Scorpio? What did they call Aries? Or these same constellations, but they're all slightly different. You have that, but that's not this. What this is are the 20 day signs are essentially, I like to call them snapshots of mythological time that repeat in a calendrical fashion. So throughout the entire mythos of Mesoamerica, you will find story examples within those day signs. Most notably the Popol
So
Vuh, and that's
cool.
where it's most preserved. So the 20 day signs, they're actually also in the Popol Vuh, but they're sometimes they're subtly hinted at. Like this chapter of the Popol Vuh was embodied by this day sign, or this scenario was embodied by this day sign. That's why we maintain it. And every time this day comes around, that day, that 24-hour period from sunrise to sunset, or sunrise to sunrise rather, is remembering that ancient time. So essentially, every day has a personality that remembers its origin, and that origin that you can tap into its energy, because that was like the first primordial story of that day when that day was being born.
That's amazing. So how many of those individual days are there?
Those are 20. And it gets complex
Wow.
because the Maya had multiple calendars and they're all weaving in and out of each other. So the day signs revolve with what are known as the Trisanas, which is a 13-day cycle, which has to do with lunations. If you think about it, the day signs are kind of like the solar aspect of geoastrology, and the Trisanas are the lunar aspect of geoastrology. So that's how I do these predictions on Substack, is that the Trisana, whoever, whatever day sign is ruling the Trisana the next 13 days. So the first day of that 13-day cycle will be the ruler of the Trisana. Its influence will be present throughout that entire 13 days. And it will have a more societal effect because the moon has a like kind of a societal influence. You think about lunatics and the full moon lunacy kind of thing. That was maintained by the Maya as well. They had an idea of that. So
Hmm.
the Trisanas are a bit more, you can predict societal outcomes. You can predict trends. And I'm not the first one to do this. There's been a couple of books on Mayan astrology that have talked about this. You can actually go back in time and be like, oh man, that was weird happening conveniently at that Trisana um, time period and whatnot. And there's a lot of like nuance to predict how the Trisanas will manifest. It's not all like every of the 13 days maintains that same level of energy. There's kind of like a building process and a declining of process, and really complex. But like I would leave it to the sacred calendar is typically based off those 20-day signs, and those are like the solar face of the telluric astrology, and then the 13 numbers are the lunar face to the telluric
Hmm.
astrology.
That's cool. Yeah, in Greece we have like Keros. Well, we have Chronos, which is time in the like it is 11:51 a.m., like that's the time that it is. It's like very specific. So, we use that to say like, what time is it? And we literally mean the clock or that's really it. Like you only use it for that technical terminology or like what time should I schedule this to go out tomorrow or whatever. But whenever we say, like, oh, this is the right time, or once upon a time, or like that kind of the more mythic sense of time, we have a different word, which is keros, which literally, like, he was a god as well. Both Kronos and Keros were considered gods in the ancient times. But again, much more in like the way that you're saying that, like the Yomasil, is that
Yumsil,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yumsil.
that same idea. It's like they're just bigger than us and old and ancient and eternal. So like what do you call that? Like that's what they are. So that like a titan is the more like traditional like way of kind of you know deciding what you would call Kronos and Keros. But so Keros is like, it is the time for this book to come out. It is the time for Elon and Trump to have a marital spat. Like whatever it is, like there's
Oh yeah,
there's
but
the
that's
keros for it. So it's almost like this is like not even an example that many people would think makes sense, but like in Lord of the Rings, there's free will. We all have free will. Everybody gets to do whatever. But Eru Iluvatar, the one who sang life into being, every so often he can dip his hand in and just pick somebody up and move them when he knows he has to. So it's like the Deus Ex Machina idea. So Keros is kind of that. It's like all the conditions are right for this thing. It's inevitable because it's the Keros for it. So it's not that people ever had rituals to him. It's not like he's not somebody you call in like you would call in Hecate, Hecate to help you with something. It's it's have reverence for this thing that is bigger than us,
mhm.
that is
and
so much bigger than us and not even aware of us as individuals and never going to be.
and that kind of mentality is a bit more like there's a lot of Mesoamerican or indigenous people that would say that's what these things were, not gods.
Hmm.
But
And
but what you
that's
just said, right?
Yeah. It's a lot
You
it's a
could
lot to say, so we use the word God, but maybe Titan.
exactly.
Maybe Titan is the word we're missing in the English word.
Uh,
Something that's so much bigger but also not going to care about us as individuals. Which as I'm saying that, it makes sense that that's why people don't want to work with deity in that way because everybody's like, "Okay, what can I get out of this relationship?"
Yeah,
Spiritual sometimes in the West, spiritual work can be commodified in such a way that it's like, "Okay, but what's in it for me?" Like,
exactly.
even when we don't realize that's the question we're asking, the question might be like, how will this enrich my spiritual path? How will this help me be a better insert here? Those are still questions of the self. And so, working with deity as an abstraction beyond self that, in fact, never is going to give a crap about you as a person because it doesn't matter, because it is bigger than you. Like, that's a message that's hard to be ready for?
It is, but that's authentically what it is. I completely agree with that too. I will say that that commodification, that's like you're absolutely right. That's Western consumerism, and I will get a little spicy here. That's essentially what like the law of attraction and a lot of manifesting culture is. It's just consumerism, but in a spirit quasi spiritual form. That's why it sells so well. That's why a lot of those manifesting
Exactly.
as celebrity coaches, they do rise to be celebrity coaches because it is it's the spirituality of the customer is always right. That's why it
Yeah. Oh,
sells
that's
well.
true.
That's why manifestation, and so even though it's such a actual like lackluster methodology of like manifesting compared to systematic approaches that you find in paganism and witchcraft and things like that, it is so lackluster. But it is the overall culture and brands that the customer is always right.
Yeah.
Um, if to get a little meta, it's like the whole Shirley MacLaine thing of like I am God, and that whole like new age adage that a lot of manifestation culture has maintained. That's quite the opposite of like what we just described in a more pagan sense of like these forces of nature that are so beyond us that the consumerism is taken out and you're
Hmm.
humbled by it. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's something you know, when you go to Target you don't want to hear, right? But if Target is your religion or your spirituality, you know, it makes me raise an eyebrow. But I think I think there are practical benefits to like doing all of this. Um like it's manifested a lot for my life, um materially and like actual like my development. But it has done so in a much more holistic way. Whereas like I
Yeah.
those more like purely intention based arts, I think it really locks you into the modern world and like in a
Yeah.
bad way, you know, like in an unhealthy way. And I mean, there's ways to do that in witchcraft and paganism too. Like again, I come from a brujeria culture. I know a lot of unhealthy brujas because a lot of the brujas, like you're coming from bad neighborhoods, you're coming from impoverished conditions, so money's on your mind, and it's like kind of like get rich or die trying kind of mentality sometimes. And some people stay stuck, they really do. But
Yeah.
I've known a lot of people that moved their selves out of bad neighborhoods and into very nice neighborhoods for their families, and they ended up making six-figure jobs, and they didn't, you know, take a more ascetic lifestyle or anything like that. They took their miracle and they left, but they did it. I just say that because any kind of intention based art, it can lead to a lot of toxic cycles, whether it is more systematic or just consumerism. And I do suggest a more holistic path, which is something like this, which is like, yeah, you have your practical spells and stuff like that, but you have a theurgic practice as well.
Yes. Yeah.
The three parts of magic across any culture, like we can break this down, dependent, like no matter what you call it, it's going to be this kind of way: divination, thaumaturgy, theurgy. Practical magic's thaumaturgy, divination's like you're forecasting, you're foresighting, and then theurgy is your like relationship, your more mystic experiences. And you can kind of chop that up based upon culture with whatever words. Like again, I could chop that up into like 10 different ways using Maya terminology, but they're all going to have that kind of function.
Yeah.
Um, I use a lot of combat sports analogies just because I I did it. I analyzed it for like professionally. So like if somebody gets knocked out with like a weird looking punch at some in some way, shape, or form, you could chop it down to a jab, cross, hook, uppercut. It's going to have some kind of basic terminology, even if it looks like unique to them. Whether that comes from boxing or
Yeah.
kung fu, it's still more or less a left hook or something.
Yeah.
And you find that across cultures with all of this woo woo stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it's true. It's a plug and play at the end of the day.
Yeah,
We're just
yeah.
always searching for language to describe something so much more transcendent. So what are some of the sacred places that were significant to ancient cultures and that are significant to these living cultures today? You know, are there modern temple centers, or is this something that's done in the home?
Let's
Yeah, we
touch
can
on
start
that
at
one
the
really quick.
small and then the big. Yeah, like what's the home altar like? You know, what's it like in the house?
So I actually had three places on top of my head, but then that was a really good question right there about modern temples. So I'm going to backwards track because we know that the Maya had a bunch of pyramids, right? We think of Egypt as the land of the pyramids, and no shade on Egypt. I know you're half Egyptian,
Yeah.
so but like archaeologists have uncovered 120 to 140 pyramids. And, within Mexico alone, there are 10,000 plus.
It's
If you
amazing.
want to, by an archaeologist standards, there are actually more pyramids in Ohio than in Egypt. Again, not throwing shade. I'm not throwing shade, but
That's funny.
that is a colonizer mindset to think that mounds do not constitute as pyramids. They do, because the sophistication of which they provided to a culture sometimes exceeded that of like a monumental pyramid and what it was able to do. Not just a ceremonial center, but it was able to help you plan crops and things like that for massive populations, based upon like your ability to track the seasons. So we know they built temples. However, there was a recent erecting of a newish temple. It's called Oxlamun Baktun Plaza in Guatemala. It was erected there around 2012, and it was seen by the Maya population to be like, it was headed by the daykeepers to be like a new ceremonial center for the Maya of today. And it's pretty gnarly looking. It's a actual plaza, stone, ground, like a giant magical circle, but stone, and with these gigantic effigies and stuff. And people do rituals there. But that's not the only place. Rituals are done all over the place in the Maya world, and typically like giant burn pits or like giant like bonfires. But in the home, this is a bit more like where my family's practice comes from. It was done more in like altars. You would have a dedicated table to it. Depending on where you're growing up, you would like to have it be take it down really quick, put it up really quick. You have a conservative Catholic uncle or something like that. These days, we're a bit more forward with it. Like I have a massive altar here with wooden carved tables from Honduras and masks from all over Mesoamerica that embody the Yumsilop and various Yumsiles. So there you do have home altars. But there's plenty of natural settings that were used for practice. And it wasn't just an ambiguous practice either. A lot of these, especially in Brujeria culture, like where my abuelo and abuela come from, you went to the rivers for specific reasons. You went to the crossroads for specific reasons. You went to the grass fields for specific reasons. And there's certain spirits that inhabit those. And those are not Yumsiles. Those are not Yumsilob. There are different kinds of spirits that are not that God level, God tier kind of thing. It's a very populated universe, and we're just one of many, kind of, in a way. But yeah, there's a lot of different characters out there. So the altar is very important. The altar is actually a day sign as well. One of the day signs is like the embodiments of the altar, and the altar was so significant in Mesoamerican cosmology because it was believed that the first humans actually predated the rise of the sun. The first humans
Whoa.
had to birth the sun through ritual. They had to
Hmm.
make offerings to get the first dawn to arise. Now, the gods had already, by that point, had done some efforts. They had their own mythology, similar to the Chaos Conf, actually, that you find in various mythologies, kind of like Zeus versus Typhon. And there's other stories too that predates the first humans, but the first humans would bring the sun out of the darkness, out of the primordial darkness. It was already alive, but they did so by making offerings at this altar. So the altar is a very sacred tool. It's not just this like, oh yeah, we obligatorily have to have an altar for like our craft and for our religion. It's like, no, it's a mechanism. It is an actual gateway that you have to develop a kind of a relationship with. uh, I've developed a big relationship with my altar to make sure that it's not just a place where I do things. It's a machine, kind of. It's a technology. So I would say that's really how they function. I don't know if every brewer would be able to give you an explanation like that. It's a lot of the times it's very intuitive, and they don't really word it that way. But that is how, if you trace it back, that's how altars were viewed. Now, what is the biggest kind of altar that you can have? A pyramid. There's an altar space on these pyramids, and the pyramid, you find pyramids all over the world. And I'm sorry to the History Channel, it wasn't aliens. That's just like the way physics worked in the primal world to build something like that. But that doesn't make this symbology any less significant. The the geometries that physics forces upon us to make pyramids is a reflection of that numinous thing that is greater than us anyways. It's forcing
Right.
us.
Yeah. Sacred
It's
geometry.
yeah, and it's the sacred order imposing itself onto chaos, forming geometry. So a pyramid would be the symbol of the connection between Earth and the upper worlds. You could say heavens, but I'm going to prefer to say upper worlds because that's how it really translates from Maya languages. Another word would be just sky, that the skies were the realm of these forces that were just so much bigger than all of creation, of which creation comes from. So, earth to sky is what these pyramids stood for. Not too alien from other pagan cultures, but maintaining this earth to sky connection, it's not just favor for the gods. And like, I guess a cynical point of view would be like, so good crops happen, so we get rainwater. And yes, all of those things, it keeps us going, and we should be grateful for those things that the UMCLS give us. But it's just the connection to creation itself. It's the legitimacy of creation. It's connecting us to those higher ideas. That's the significance of a pyramid. That's a bit more of a mystic turn to it, but I think that's what's lost here
Yeah,
because
100%. Archaeology is so sanitized when we're talking about a spiritual location. We can't not talk about the spiritual at that location. Yeah.
yeah, because it's like yes, there was practical things involved, but that's not unlike witchcraft. It's like people do witchcraft for practical things, but there is a numinous accord to it as well,
Yeah, it's
and
that building relationship.
connecting Earth to sky is a way to maintain order within the civilization. Why? Because what is civilization without order? We're just hunter gatherers again. We don't have civilization. We don't have temples. We don't have schools. We don't have like plumbing systems because the Maya had like an aqueduct system of like a sanitation systems. They had marketplaces where you could readily get food. That's where agricultural civilization happened. So the pyramid also stands for maintaining that connection to the Yumsiles, the gods, who reflected a cosmic order. The reason why the Mesoamerican political systems were councils was because mythologically, the Popol Vuh means the council book, because the
Mm.
gods were a council. Not one of them was the supreme ruler. They had rulers, but it went through a council based system. It could not be done without representation from the other leaders. So, as I mentioned, there was a chaos conf, right? In the Popol Vuh, the Yumseles fight these monsters called Zipakna and Kabrakan and Seven Macaw. And these monsters, you'll get a lot of explanations from them, but I'll give you some theories. And that is the primal Earth. That is Earth before civilization, wild animals, torrential weather, uh, the Earth before life was formed, and your struggle against the wild. And to overcome that, people need to work together. That's a council. That is order. That is a civilization. Those are leaders coming together. So the Yumsiles provide a model for that through their council system that's maintained by the pyramid structure. So maintaining the pyramid structure and brings celestial order to the natural chaos. And that's how things were run. So it was highly esoteric and highly practical. That's why they didn't have a. This is probably a reason why they did not have a word specifically for religion or spirituality. It's because when you're coming from a primal environment, it really is all the same.
Yeah, it's embedded in life. Same for the ancient Greeks. There's no religion until no word for religion until they are needing to expand Greek. Like literally, like around Alexander the Great's time period when Truthfully, I think it came out of like literally they were meeting people all the way out in India, all the way out in the British Isles, and they were like, wow, these people talk about all kinds of weird different things that we don't know how to communicate to them in. So they started to come up with new words then. Like we call it Kindi Greek. That's like the beginning of modern Greek. So yeah, it's so interesting to think that across the globe maybe that was maybe an understanding of it's just part of life. I think that's I really think that's what's missing so often in the West is just rites of passage, ritualization. Even like I'm starting a coven this summer, and people are like, okay, so like what do we learn? What do we learn? And I'm like, well, it's a coven. You're learning the rituals of a tradition. So you're gonna do those rituals every year. That's what they are. It's Lammas. We're celebrating the sun. We're celebrating the first harvest. We're celebrating marketplaces because practically that was when it was most convenient for everybody to travel in Western Europe. Like that's what we're doing. And then we're gonna do it next Lammas and the Lammas after that. And you can tell for some people that's like, oh, like it's gonna be boring. Like you can see in their eyes, they're like, oh, that's maybe boring. And it's like, no, that's it's through the repetition of a system that it becomes meaningful and that it impacts us personally, as well as, like you said, the holistic implications that it has for our lives. It makes us a better version of ourselves to participate in them and to do them next year after this year. This year it's new. Next year it's, oh, I remember where I was at last time I did this. And, it's interesting. I was too nervous to talk to so and so, but today I went right over to the new person and talked to them. Like I'm really growing in my communication. And like we get to reflect on where we were last time we used that system. So yeah.
For the group that I will be making to, I am doing the exact same thing. There are actual the 20 days system, the calendars. I will be maintaining that, but that is like we're talking about the same thing. That time worship is like what creates the the backbone of the group going forward and developing and staying true to those routines. There's some missing Maya holidays that I will be implementing a lot that they've escaped our culture for because of colonization. But there's a lot of archaeological documents that actually show that these were very sacred times for certain city states, and I will be implementing those as well. But I'm so glad that you brought that up because just on a practical sense, practical enchantment means a lot to me because you know I'm not trying to talk down on anybody's path here, but I'm very proud of my upbringing. I didn't learn my stuff on Wikipedia. Like I learned my stuff quite literally in the streets. I grew up in a witchcraft culture. So when you're talking about practical magic, I'm totally down for it. I will also tell you that from everything we're talking about here is much more theurgic and mystical because you need that too. Like like
Yeah.
if I was going to train somebody to whether it's going to be in the NBA or the UFC, I'm not going to have them eating hamburgers. I'm going to have them like eating vegetables and stuff. That's like your mysticism. It's like your spiritual health. Your practical enchantment is like your spiritual, like actual, like you playing the sport. And then your divination is kind of like your game planning, and you're like actual, like you're being a steward of the craft. But
Yeah, I like
every
that. Yeah, that's so true.
but what you said about sticking to like the routine of observing these days, that's becoming an actual advanced practitioner. That's not
Mhm.
beginner shit anymore. Oh, pardon my language. That's not 101 because I hate the question of like what are your best tips for beginners and stuff because typically when people are asking that, that's like saying how do I get advanced or remarkable results without putting that much work into it? It's like if that was the case, okay, try and join the NBA without trying hard. Try uh
Yeah.
like try join the minor leagues or something. And it doesn't have to be a competition, but I'm just saying like anything you want results in life, you have to put in a little bit of work. I think that's part of the problem with the word magic is that people have a Hollywood understanding of the word magic and they
Yeah.
don't see it as a skill set. They think it as an instant solution. It's not an instant solution. There's a bunch of skills involved with it. There's a lot of development involved with it. And if you put in the work, something like a regimented routine like that, you will get advanced and you will have amazing stories to tell because you will get better at the skill set. I'm not the only one that feels this way. And it's not just my tradition that does this. We've got an order here in Ohio of people that come from a like legitimate Kabbalistic backgrounds, like ethnically, like Hasidic Jew, ATR people. grimoire people, angel magic people, eclectic witchcraft people, obviously indigenous, and we all have the same fundamentals. It's a skill set. And observing these, having that discipline to observe these holy days and do these practices, it's called practice for a reason. This is actually how you get substantial results in your practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this episode because this is an advanced episode. Like I'm gonna probably put that in the description because I think it's a lot. It's a lot and we're saying it all.
Yeah. And it's not going to appeal for everybody. Not in this for the money, but we're definitely not going to make a lot of money for talking about things like this because it doesn't, being advanced at anything is not average. So the
Yeah.
average person isn't going to buy into it.
Hmm.
I
And it's
remember,
boring. I think a lot of people forget. Like, I describe it as like, we will plateau. It's like physical training. Like, you will plateau, and you just have to keep using your routine. And I have had a lot of clients over the years. They hit that plateau and they stop practicing altogether. They're like, I don't know. It's just like the same as. So I just, and then they just stop practicing. And then a year later, they're like, yeah, I feel like I need to restart and then the same thing happens. All these great gains really quickly. And then the plateau comes. And then you have to decide once again, are you going to pursue, continue your traditions? And then I promise you, you're going to have the cool downloads again. It's going to be better. But you have to continue that plateau of practice before,
mhm.
before the gains return.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it was Hickson Gracie that was asked one time. He was like asked, how does an average person become a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? And he was like, average people don't become a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that's the same case for any skill set. And that's most certainly the case with all of this craft stuff. Average people won't. Like if you want McDonald's magic, there's stuff for that. Um, just it's easy to find. But I near guarantee you the results coming from stuff like that is just because of pure materialism. A lot of people forget that I think one of the most powerful forces in all of magic is position. Like
Mm.
when Elon is like making like all these like amazing entrepreneurial stats of Elon making like this and that. Well, he started off rich. Like it was the the jump and the feat of strength to do amazing things really wasn't that much. I consider the feats of strength that I witnessed growing up in the neighborhoods of people that were literally getting shot, like their neighborhoods would get shot at every night. There'd be bullet holes in the wall and stuff. They moved out of bad situations like that, got out of bad legal situations, got out of bad health situations, moved to a different neighborhood, got a spectacular house, loving family. That is more of an achievement to me than whatever these technocrats do, whatever these millionaires do, because it was always downhill for them. Like it was always a downhill, they had a handicap on life. So yeah, it's not for the average, but I guarantee anybody for virtually any path out there. I say virtually because there are some that are just like completely contrived, but like a legitimate pagan or craft path, you can change your life and have an amazing time here on earth if you just put in a little bit of work and wonder.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Work and wonder. Well, thanks for joining me in the Seeking Numina podcast. I would love to give you a chance here too to share anything coming up for you. I'm trying to remember when this episode will come out. I think it's like August. So after Mystic South. But if you've got anything great coming up this fall.
Yes, so I got Mystic South in Atlanta that week. It's like July 11 through July 13. Go ahead and hit me up. Subscribe to the Mayan Mystery Codex on Substack. You can find that at just go on Substack, look for Mayan Mystery Codex, or you can just type in solomonpakal.com. It'll take you straight there. There I give biweekly Mayan Trisana world astrology reports. So far, I'm on a roll with predicting world events and societal energies. And I'm given a bunch of cool information there. You're not going to find the run of the mill kind of witchcraft and pagan and magic kind of stuff there. I really want to get into the advanced magic stuff. That's where my passion is. I don't want to talk about 101 things. I want to talk about, I don't mean advanced to where like it's quantum physics. I'm trying to make this relatable. Again, I come from a practical craft. So,
Yeah. But you're
but
not
there's a lot
gonna
of fun stuff.
remind everybody about what the four elements are.
No, nope, not that, not candle colors and what they mean.
Yeah.
Only if it's like, I will say that like some of the colors and directions and stuff like that, they're not the same in Mesoamerica that they are in like a Wicca tradition. So
Yeah,
I
that's cool.
understand the need to educate on that. That's totally fine. I'm trying to make it the best occult Substack out there. I'm
You're
determined
doing a
to.
great
So
job.
you,
It's so
oh, well, thank
awesome.
you. And you said August, right? This will be out in August.
I think so. Yeah. If my
Okay, so
math is right.
I'm trying to get my website and courses up. If you subscribe to the Mayan Mystery Codex, you'll know if that comes out by then. But I'm trying to put my nose to the grindstone and get that out. Lots of great things. I got a book coming out. Can't announce the publisher, I don't think yet. But there will be a course that comes out with that as well. I know people are getting course fatigue, but this is most certainly a path. And I would argue that like, anything you do is worth a course as well, too. This is a path. These kinds of paths need that representation. This isn't Witchcraft 101. These are things that go much deeper. They're a lot cooler because they're just like more in depth into the mythology and culture, and they're just better. Like I like they're just like higher quality systems that you can apply to make practical things happen into your life and make these mystic recollections happen in your
Yeah.
path. So I'll just stick with my mystery codex for now on Substack, and then from there you can keep up with all my announcements. But I got a lot of major things coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. And I'm hoping I can have you back on next year too, like as things progress and move along and we'll have you on Magic Kitchen podcast too.
Yeah, I know because you and me, we got a similar thing going on with our ethnic practice and trying to bring it up to the modern in the modern world. I think
Yeah.
we come from a similar background too, where we're not just coming from the culture, but we're looking at, well, what can archaeology tell us? And but as a
Yes.
practitioner, what can I see that an archaeologist can't?
Exactly. Yeah, it's that
That's
holistic
unique
experience. Yeah. Yep. Oh
because
man.
you will find people that are either all tradition or all academic. People that are either team spirit and nothing else or team science and nothing else. And clearly, it's just like any truth, it's always somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. Exactly. And I do think it's important that it seems to be falling to people like us who are liminal. Like we are both of the culture and able to extrapolate outside of it. I really think that's an important factor of why we're the ones called to do this for our respective cultures because, when I talk to Greeks in Greece, only in Greece, lifelong in Greece, they're just too afraid of the ramifications of talking about these things. And if they are trapped in the Greek culture exclusively as well, you see a lot of like, kind of like neo fascism stuff rising in the background of polytheist organizations. And I'm like, not having it, not doing any of that. That's not coming into any of this. And it wouldn't have for the ancients. So why are we talking about it?
I'm so glad you brought up that like how we're liminal because I actually told Liz the other day. I feel I've like there's a lot of liminal discussions of liminal peoples in at Sacred
Yeah,
Space, and I was really caught by that. But it I asked myself it on a like an ethnic question of liminality that it wasn't brought up in discussions at Sacred Space. I was like, does this apply to me? And I
yeah,
started to feel that it did. I'm glad I'm not alone in thinking that it does.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's a blessing. It's a curse at first, but it's overall a blessing. I feel like it's so hard to feel not lonely when you have too much going on that nobody else can relate to. But at the end of the day, it's our strength. We just need to learn how to use our voice from its unique place. And we are.
Thank you for seeking Numina with me today. Join me at patreon.com/Elise Wells to support this show and get access to a library of rituals, exclusive videos, meditations, and more. To learn more about my upcoming retreats, book a tarot reading, or learn with me in workshops, classes, or mentorship, visit seekingnumina.com.